There are a whole host of exceptional players coming out of India right now, and one of the youngest of these is Gukesh. Now his first name's a bit difficult to say, Domaraju, but he goes by D Gukesh. Now he's just playing exceptional chess right now. He won 3 Open tournaments in Spain recently. He then did really well in the Sharjah Masters. He finished 6th out of a very strong field. And Nodibek Abdusattorov actually won that tournament, by the way. Another child prodigy who you've seen on this channel and in the chess world. Now I wanted to show you one of these games here from the Sharjah Masters, and I'm looking at Gukesh in particular because he's on the verge of actually crossing into the 2700 club, the elite, the so-called super grandmasters, and he'd become the 3rd youngest player to do it if he can do so. Wei Yi was ahead of him, so was Alireza Firouzja, but he's just a hair behind Alireza Firouzja. There's really nothing in it in terms of their rating progress. So this game, Gukesh had white here. He was playing against Suleymanli, apologies for pronunciation, and he kicks off here with pawn to d4. So we had knight f6 in response, pawn c4, e6 inviting the Nimzo, but knight f3 played, no mainline Nimzo, and now d5 was played, going back into a queen's gambit declined. We had knight c3, and now a really strange move here from black, pawn to h6. I mean, many moves have been tried there. Bishop e7, bishop b4. You can take a kind of delayed accepted. c6, you know, many moves as you can imagine. But this one's very rare. I mean, it stops bishop g5, but of course it's a bit slow. You're not developing a piece. You're not fighting for the center. So Gukesh now goes g3, adopts a kind of Catalan setup here. We had bishop to d6. And now Gukesh takes his turn to go pawn a3, these so-called bunny ears on the side of the board here, you know, closing in the board like that. And okay, it could be a useful waiting move, seeing how black wants to play. And what's really interesting is that Gukesh is actually delaying bishop to g2 here. And we'll see why in a moment, because after black castles, this is why I absolutely love this game. Gukesh now goes pawn to g4 here. You know, really just taking that fight to black. And they're so well prepared, these young guys. When you run this with the engine, c5 is best when you run it there, but then g4 is second best, give white's nice advantage. And the whole point here is that if the knight takes, which did happen, well then you're attacking down the g-file. Now best here, by the way, was knight to e4, and it makes a ton of sense when I see the computer suggest this move, because you open up the queen to the defense. And if, say, g5 now, you can actually close things with h5. Very complicated and sharp still, of course. And white doesn't really want to be taking here. Bringing this pawn in, kicking the knight is not ideal. So that was the best defensive move there, knight e4. But instead we had knight takes on g4, inviting the attack. So rook g1 played. And now you can't just drop this knight back here. Bishop takes here is just absolutely terrible. You're losing in exchange, essentially. If you try knight h5 stuff, it's just really bad after e3. The queen will soon be joining all over, essentially, without going through all the lines. So we didn't have the knight dropping back here. Instead, pawn e5 was played. So this opens up the bishop to defend the knight and also seeks to counterplay in the center because of the attack on the flank. Now you can already actually take this pawn on e5. This is good for white. If the knight recaptures here, you can take pawn on h6 like this. Yes, you can take with check, pawn recaptures, bishop e5 to protect, but it's still a good game for white. You know, pressure here, pressure against the king. So you could have taken on e5. Instead, Gukesh decides to take the pawn on d5. Still a good move here. We had rook to e8 now from black. So looking to tuck that bishop back and defend soon, and also trying to create some counter chances against the uncastled white king. So white now goes knight to e4, and here black just plays a bit too slowly. They retreat the bishop here, but actually best was bishop to f5, and I just want to show you why this is best. Now white is forced to take here essentially, then the pawn recaptures. Now white can go h3, kick the knight. After it drops back, you can actually flick in this takes on e5, this is the best computer line, then take on h6. And now the whole point of the bishop f5 thing is that you can drop the bishop back to g6, cover the g file. This is that really nice defensive maneuver about the whole thing. But we didn't have bishop f5. Instead, this bishop just retreated. So in this position here, retreated to f8. But this is just really inviting on the attack. So pawn h3 played. And now black doesn't retreat the knight, but takes on d4, opening up this rook here. This was the whole idea of retreating the bishop, so that if white takes here, well then black takes here. And this is actually better for black because you've now closed off the g file. So instead we had takes on d4, picks up the pawn, protects the knight. Now queen e7 was played, still not retreating this knight. Again, if you take, well then we win here, and this is decent for black. So instead knight c3 played, just moving that one out of the way. Now this knight dropped back into e5 here. f6 was also an option, and this allows Gukesh to actually just liquidate pieces. So he actually chops off the queens here, the rook recaptures, but his attack rages on after he takes on h6 here. And what's really interesting is how paralysed black still is because of this lack of development on the queen side here. So rook to h5 was now played, it hits the bishop and hits that pawn. The bishop dropped back to f4, and now black didn't take here just yet, because then you're losing here, not ideal. So instead c6 was played, and now rook to d1 came, bringing more pieces into the attack, looking to open this file soon, create these nasty pins, and black therefore takes on h3, developing a piece with tempo here, but knight e4 from Gukesh, great move, and this comes with a threat. So if, for example, you took on f1, well now we can check using this pin of the pawn, and then you pick up the rook. So that's why rook f5 was played here. You cover the check, you hit the unprotected bishop, but Gukesh ignores that one. He takes here instead. The rook took on f4, and after bishop to c8, black actually resigned in this position. Now it was perhaps a bit premature. I mean, if you take here, this isn't good because white takes here. Say you have a line like this, white's just an exchange up, will also be winning a pawn, clearly won. Although you could go knight to a6, again looks horrible because we take here, hitting two pieces, but then after rook d8, you can take on a6, but you do take on e4, winning the piece back. Now again, after takes, let's say takes with check, king recaptures, bishop d6 blocking here, it's still completely lost because despite the opposite colour bishops, white's 2 pawns up. But okay, it was maybe slightly premature to resign, could have maybe fought on, but sometimes when you're in that miserable position, you just want to resign and get out of there, to be honest. So what I love about this game is the g4 move, not playing in your stereotypical fashion, just going for that attack. So watch out for Gukesh, maybe soon to join the 2700 club. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do consider subscribing if you never want to miss a future video, and see another amazing game which Gukesh played in, click here. Thanks very much for watching, see you soon.